Hi, I'm Tim Myers, and I'm the owner of Ascenda Music Publishing. And today we are going to talk to Amanda Stewart. Amanda is Associate Principal Trombone of the St. Louis Symphony and was my colleague for maybe 10 seasons. Maybe Amanda remembers it differently, I'm not sure. Lately I've been blogging about kind of workplace issues. How to be a colleague, how to get along in rehearsal, and of course that's all from my perspective. I'm one person, and one thing that defines me, I guess, is that I'm a man, and so there's no way I could have the perspective of a woman. So what better way than to ask somebody like Amanda to chime in? So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you doing this. So I just want to start out by asking you, you got into music in my memory of your history. You got into music very early, um, and you were at Juilliard, and then you got into the orchestral world. Is there any point in all of this where you started to think that you needed to address somehow the issue of being a woman? In, I suppose in some places it's some places, some orchestras maybe think of themselves as a man's world. But I mean, did you have any experience that made you think, I've got to think about this?
Sure. Yeah. I would say, like, you're correct. I started on trombone quite young. I was almost 7. And so from the origin story, you could say I didn't really experience any type of issues in regards to being a woman and choosing the trombone to play because where I grew up, it was a very small town, and I was basically the only person my age I knew was playing something. So it didn't seem abnormal to me to choose the trombone. Um, and so I did, and that was offered to me, and that's what I played. Um, I would say early on in middle school, I was in all-state middle school band, and then at all-state high school, and I saw other female trombone players there. There was another female trombone player in my high school band, and so in that experience, I didn't really see it yet either, because I was already seeing female trombone players. Um, I would say I actually thought about this a little bit because I knew this interview was coming. When I was in high school, I went to, I'm not going to say the festival because I don't want it to anyone to think of the person I'm talking about. But I went to a music festival, and when I was in high school, and I had this really unfortunate experience with a, a, a young male trombone player. Basically, I started off as second chair, and then through the rest of the festival, I ascended to principal, and I kept that chair the whole time. And I know it drove him nuts because he actually started to stalk me, unfortunately. And so he would, if I would be practicing in the kind of the music building, the practice rooms had windows on the doors, and he would stand outside the practice room and just stare at me for like 15 minutes while I practiced. And then every once in a while, he would come in and say, "You're doing it all wrong," and he would, you know, try to basically play mind games with me. And then at some point, he said, "I'm really struggling that you're principal and I'm not." So I
Well,
was thinking,
he actually said it out
yeah.
loud.
Yeah, he said, if I was thinking if you were my girlfriend, maybe it would be easier on me. And I was like, no, I'm gonna be your girlfriend. Why would I be your girlfriend? You're stalking me. So I was thinking about this. I was actually walking my dog, thinking about this story before this interview. And I can't say for sure if it was related to sexism because he was really struggling with a female being the principal player, or if it perhaps was simply he was bested basically and he was not the principal. And I can't really say for sure, but I know I definitely felt uncomfortable. I didn't tell anybody about it. It was just like, this is happening. I don't know what to do about it. I didn't know to tell anybody.
Right.
I went out of my way to find places to practice where I knew he wouldn't find me. And then eventually it ended. It probably lasted for about 2 weeks, and then he must have decided, oh, I should stop stalking her. So, um, yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like for a lot of female players, there's probably something that we've been through that we've forgotten because I had forgotten that story. But I've been thinking a lot about being a woman in music the past couple months. And that was like one story that I had forgotten, basically. Anyway, so fast forward to my time at Juilliard, I didn't really experience inside of the school itself any type of feeling like I was different, being treated differently. I felt very much that I had been treated equally there. But I'd already experienced something a little odd in that way. I know definitely growing up outside of music that I had experienced being told girls can't do that, only boys can do that, but just like in sports and things like that. So the paradigm of women being considered not able to do something, I'd already run into outside of music. So, but I hadn't really experienced that yet. I will, but I had not yet. Yeah,
Well, and so you're at Juilliard a total of 6 years, I guess. Is that
four,
right?
4 years.
Or
Yeah, because
four? Four?
I only have my bachelor's. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then you went right into the orchestra world.
Yes.
And was that a shift? I mean, I just from my own experience, from being a student and being poor and being, like, what am I going to do with my life, to suddenly having a job, that in itself was a pretty big deal. But tell me about your transition to the professional world.
Sure. I think just on the face of it, the first thought I had was going from knowing having your circle of friends and having this pattern. I wake up, I go to school, I go to the class, I see all these people, I have all these friends, I have my lesson, and it's just on repeat basically. And so when I first got to San Antonio, I felt actually really lonely.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really know anybody, and so I didn't have a circle of friends I was already, connected with. Also, the symphony that I joined, our season, I think it was only 26 weeks, so it wasn't. I didn't have work every week either. And this is kind of funny story about me, but to deal with the loneliness, instead of like going out and trying to make friends, I just got addicted to Little House on the Prairie. For the first several months I was there, I just came home and watched Little House on the Prairie. I don't I don't know why. It brought me comfort, I suppose, because it reminded me of my childhood a little bit. But yeah, over time I made friends, and it was also figuring out how to use all of that time. I had suddenly had all this time, and I just practiced all the time. But you can only do so much of that. So it was just a little bit of figuring out what to do with yourself now that your day isn't packed with something.
Um, so I'm going to let you figure out what parts of your orchestra life you want to talk about. But during our time together in St. Louis, um, maybe talk about that, and if there's anything you can say about that. I mean, I have my own opinions about what that workplace is like, but I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, I know there's one thing in particular I want to highlight about our section in St. Louis for sure. I as the orchestra culture as a whole, coming to St. Louis, I'd already been a member of two other orchestras, and St. Louis definitely really stood out for its collegial nature. It felt very much like a family in many ways because I felt there was a great deal of support from musician to musician. And it felt like we weren't just musicians, we were people, and that was recognized, and we treated each other as people, as human beings, and not just this person in this chair who's here for this slotted amount of time to get their paycheck and then they go. It was we cared about each other, and that was I felt that I would say to some extent in San Antonio as well. I didn't feel it in New York.
Oh,
That was not the culture there. Um, and I so the thing I want to highlight for me that was very transformative was actually how are you in particular, you Jerry and John, but you in particular because you were the principal of the section, how you made me feel in that section. And I had not really experienced this at up until I got here. So I had been in the field for a decade already. And so it really stood out to me because you made me feel like I was your equal. And that was new to me. Even though I'm younger than you and I was new, I didn't have tenure yet, but you already made me feel like my opinion mattered. You wanted to know what my opinion was, and you invited me. So you gave me room to be an equal player in that section, and I feel like um, obviously I'm a better player, a better section mate, a better professional because you let me practice that finally. And I was able to grow more as a person. And yeah, you just helped me my trajectory basically. Like I was able to grow and become a contributing member of a section in a way that I had not really experienced yet. So huge thank you to you, really.
well, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Um, well, to slightly change direction, I just want to, for folks who might be watching this, they might not know about this. I saw a live remote presentation that you did recently at the International Trombone Festival, the 2024 in Fort Worth. And I had already known this about you, but that was quite a presentation. And I just want to ask you, what events in your life have led you to be so passionate and articulate about um, issues of equality, gender equality, and that kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I can approach this from a couple different angles. I would say the most obvious reason is, um, what happened to me and what occurred basically when I was a member of the New York Philharmonic. I think that's basically it was like a shock to the system, basically, where I had to confront a traumatic experience, and then went to therapy. But it made me start to consider, well, why did this happen, and over time just like living in the world, learning, reading, growing as an individual, being able to see the cultural perhaps reason why as well. So an isolated incident and then looking at, well, how does it fit in the context of our country, our world, um, and understanding that reality through research and reading, basically. So lived experience, and then wanting to learn about the culture, um, and also knowing I'm not alone. I'm not alone in having this experience. Um, so that was kind of the specific reason why I got in. I became invested into learning more about um, gender inequality, sexual assault, harassment, and things like that, discrimination. Um, I would say though, from a young age, I was always really kind of drawn to people who stood up for other people. Um, One of my favorite movies growing up was about racism. Actually, it was a Disney movie. It's funny to think of a Disney movie highlighting that, but the movie was called Perfect Harmony, and I was drawn to it. I think also because it involved music, but the heart of the story is these two young boys become really close friends, a young white boy and a young black boy. And it's during the time where um, it's in the South, and these two young boys, their friendship is seen as dangerous and problematic. And so the young white boy, no matter what, he's going to be friends with this young man, and he ends up being attacked actually because of his friendship and hurt. long story short, it causes these two young boys to have their community confront this racism, what's happening. And I was always really touched by the young man who chose to do the right thing. And so I think, I've thought about racism, and then to me, sexism and racism, they just are like, you know, peanut butter and jelly. They just kind of go together. They're this it's very similar systems, and in our country, they have just been intertwined with one another. From what I've learned, and seeing it in my own experience, seeing it in the lives of other of my friends. Um, yeah, that was kind of a long-winded way of saying that, but personal experience definitely led me to start looking into that. And then I've you know I've really enjoyed getting to learn more and researching about just the topic in general, because I kind of love history. So it's a really heavy topic, though. It's not like
Yeah.
it's a woo-hoo,
Yeah. Well, so Amanda, do you have any other projects in the works, musical or related to the music business or otherwise?
Sure. I do, but I almost feel like I don't want to say what they are to jinx myself. No, I will. Because I feel like they're very much in like the percolating stage. I was able to sit down with a friend of mine recently who helped me look at grant writing, and possible places to find money, because I would really like to do some of these things. But um, I think one area is, I wanted to start arranging music by female composers, that it maybe for other instruments, that for trombone. I might attempt to compose.
Wow, that's
I'll
great.
see. Yeah. And then kind of the next thing I'd really love to do, and I just need to figure out how to do it, is I want to delve into creating a more immersive recital experience, where it involves video, like whole stage video, something like we did with the Messiaen, here in St. Louis, the Candy to the Stars.
Oh yeah.
With what was John Adams, his wife? What's her name?
The video artist.
Yeah, I forget her name.
Sorry, I can't, but
Yeah, I
I
can't
remember.
remember. But it was one of the coolest experiences I think I've had performing in an orchestra, because I felt like, you had this converging of visual art with the videographer, and the lighting, and then the music, and it felt like you could convey not just what the composer intended, which we were doing through the music, but you could add another layer of meaning on top of it through visual art, and it felt like something really extraordinary that I hadn't really been a part of before. And so it would be really interesting, I think, to have a projector, work with making a video, and then trying to marry that with a composition. So I mean, so that's what I would like to do, but who knows?
Wow, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I didn't know this was going on. I'm glad I asked.
It's just up in my brain.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Amanda, thank you for this conversation. This is great. Maybe we should do this again sometime. Maybe when you've got your this immersive uh, concert experience kind of in the works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would
that'd
love
be
that.
great. Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right.